Okay. All righty. So now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Nancy Glass, who comes to us from Johns Hopkins. You can read her fabulous bio in your book. You're going to hear about her wonderful research around the world, and I especially love just talking with her about her work at the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, when I was in school, it was called something different, probably for many of you as well. So, and she's a pig farmer. I can't wait to hear this story. So, but she is so a world-renowned researcher, well-funded, well-published, and well-respected by her students and colleagues alike. So please welcome Dr. Glass.
So good morning. It's really nice to be here in Atlanta. I got out of Baltimore with the horrible snow. And gosh, what a bunch of committed folks up here at 8:15 in the morning. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a trip to the Democratic Republic of Congo and the work we've been doing there for the last 10 years. And I think the first message I want to give to students or junior researchers that what I said was 10 years. This is the long game. This is a process. And partnerships take time, and getting funding takes time. So you will hit bumps in the road, but don't be discouraged. If NIH will fund pigs in the Congo, they'll fund anything. So let's go. Okay, great. So the first thing is just starting out with, these are some of my partners in the DRC. I have an amazing group of colleagues that I've worked with, and these are partners with vision and passion and commitment to success and rebuilding their communities post-conflict. So, I give all the success to the commitment of these amazing people. So just to let you know where we are, if you haven't been to the Congo recently, it is in the center of Africa. It's a massive country. It's about the size of the U.S., east of the Mississippi. And it is surrounded by 11 other African countries. It has about 20 kilometers of ocean front on the west, and that's where I was a Peace Corps volunteer here in the early 90s and fell in love with the country and was lucky enough to go back to the eastern part of the country, and that's where you see the small map pulled out, and we're in the area, it might be a little bit hard to read, but our research is in the Kalehe area of the eastern part of the DRC. And just to give you context, this is the area that was, when the genocide in Rwanda in the early 90s occurred, this is where about 1 million refugees moved into the country. And you can imagine the impact on the community. And so the conflict followed into this area. This is also one of the most rich areas in coltan, which is, if you look at your smartphones or our computers, that's the mineral that allows us to heat up our batteries without exploding, unless you have a Samsung. But this is an incredibly important mineral, very rare, but about 80% of the Earth reserve is in this part of the Congo. So there's a lot of conflict over land and minerals. There's diamonds, there's gold. So this is what keeps the instability and fragility in this community. So also let me just give you where the country rates against other countries that really looking at economic development. So when we look at the Human Development Index, which is a global index, and that's really how we define long and healthy lives and access to knowledge and decent standard of living, the DR Congo is 186 out of 187 countries that are included in the measure. And this certainly is linked to the conflict and insecurity since the 90s, but also very few women, especially about 10% of women, have any access to secondary or higher level of education, and only about 35% or 36% of men. So in our study, I'll talk a little bit more about this, 60% of the men and women in our study had no education. A lot of that had to do with conflict and the lack of access to schools and safety. And there is a complete absence of governance in this part of the country. There is a president, although his mandate was over in 2015, and he won't leave office. He won't hold election. This creates more insecurity. But imagine a country where you can't go from east to west on a road. There's no roads. You have to take the Congo River, which would take about 2 weeks. And so there's not, you either have to fly. It's cheaper. It costs about $1,000 to fly across the country. It's easier. Sometimes it's cheaper to go to Brussels and then come back down to Kinshasa. So it's a very hard to move, and that impacts the economy, of course. So a lot of people are involved in the informal economy, and this is why the work we're doing. And then looking at gender inequality, my area is violence prevention research. So I really went to Congo looking at inequalities and reproductive health and economic empowerment and activity. And in the Gender Inequality Index, Congo is 144th out of 148 countries that participate in the measure. And for 540 women die from pregnancy-related causes for every 100,000 live births. And only 8% of members of parliament are women. I tell them that's about the same in the US, so they're okay. 70% of women and 73% of men are in the labor market out of necessity, certainly supporting families, but women are primarily in the informal markets and with limited protections of their resources, legal protection or access to credit collateral to build their businesses. And also, this has to be one of the most beautiful areas of the world. It's on Lake Kivu, which is one of the largest lakes in the world. It's in the mountains. The weather is impeccable. There's no humidity. Imagine that, Atlanta. So, in the evening, it gets down to about 70, 75, and it gets up to about 80, 85 during the day. So it's a beautiful area to be. But there's been quite a lot of environmental degradation related to, which causes competition, certainly, and conflict over the natural resources. And so most people depend on agricultural, animal husbandry, forestry, or artisanal mining or small-scale mining for their livelihood. There's no real industries here. Imagine with no infrastructure, no governance, it's hard to set up a business, a large business or industry. So we've been working the last 10 years to develop a program called, and this is a promotion of rural families, is the English sort of this promotion de la famille paysan. And so this is in the South Kivu region, and so this is one of our families that we work with, and you'll see in these cages here are their pigs. And so we'll talk a little bit more why pigs and why we've moved to this direction. So we got an idea with my partner in Congo to develop a program called Pigs for Peace. And it's a hybrid microfinance asset transfer program. And what that means is our project loans a family, a household, a pig when the pig's about 3 months old. You can wean a pig from a mom when they're 3 months old. I know way too much about pigs now. But, and then we mentor them. We do home visitation. You can tell the nurse in me, we do a lot of home visits. We do a lot of mentorship about care and about health and linking animal health to human health. And at 8 months, we support them in the first breeding of that animal. And a pig gestation is 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. And so when they give birth, we ask the family to pay back that loan with a piglet for the loan and a piglet for the interest. So they give 2 back to the project, which we give to other members in the community. So that's how we've grown. In our study, on average, the first offspring is 6 piglets. So they give 2 back to us. They remain with 4 and the original mom, and they move forward. They don't owe us anymore. We mentor them to continue, and that's how they build their savings account, in essence. Remember, 4%, well, remember, I haven't told you yet, but 4% of the population has electricity. So no one's butchering a pig and having it for dinner, because it's just, there's no refrigeration. So this is more like a savings account where they can address crisis or opportunities. So, for example, women and men. About 80% of our participants are women, and I'll tell you why in a second. But they use it to pay school fees. They sell a piglet for about $25, or they wait till it gets a bit older and they can sell it for about $70. And they can pay the school fees for their children. They can pay off their medical bills. They can buy medicine. And about the third round of gestation, we're seeing the families start to rebuild their homes. So as you see this thatch roof, they start to put tin on those. You can imagine during the rainy season, although that thatch is really good, having a durable housing is really important. It really helps them not have to rebuild constantly. And so it becomes a resource that they build on, and it becomes capital, in essence, to start different projects. Because I know this sounds crazy, but not everybody wants to be a pig farmer. So some move on to other animals, goats, cows, if they can. Some move on to other market-based programs. They might sell other things, charcoal, wood, other things in the market, depending. This is my amazing partner. They're called PIADEC, and it's a Congolese-led economic development organization. And they've been around through the wars. They've been around for about 30 years now. And the co-founder has been really, I consider him, I always tease my partner that my soulmate is a 65-year-old Congolese man. But he is just such an incredible human being, and I'm so lucky every day to work with him. And so just, if you live in rural Africa or rural many parts of the world, agriculture and animal husbandry is how you gain wealth. And so wealth is not like wealth here, but wealth in the community. And so that's why we've been focusing on animal husbandry as a link to agriculture. Now, we also were, of course, with my focus in research, we work on equality and a gender-responsive program. So the question is, why pigs? Why did we choose pigs? Well, pigs can be owned and sold by women. So cows and goats are part of the dowry system. So in communities, usually a male household pays the female household a cow or goat when they're married. And so that's a long-standing tradition. And so if a woman was to take a cow or goat that was owned by the family, that would be considered almost stealing, because it's seen as for other purposes. And so, but pigs, the men were like, we don't really care. We don't want a pig. And the women were like, right on, we'll take a pig, because they get that pigs are productive. They can give birth twice a year. They give multiple offsprings, where cows and goats are usually one offspring. So, and people always say, why didn't you do chickens? Well, in this area that we work, the majority tribal group is the She people, and many of the older women don't eat chicken or eggs. So that's long-standing, again, cultural. And this is why it's so important to have amazing partners. How would I have known that? It would have taken me years to really notice that some women weren't eating chicken. So having partners that can really tell you the reason why it's better to go with pigs is really incredibly important. And pigs this is a Catholic Protestant community, very, very small number of Muslims. So we weren't offending the community. So these are the reasons we chose the pig. And so we also are focused on environmental sustainability. One of my best jobs is standing and looking. Don't I do a good job of it? Like standing, looking? Yeah. So the reason I'm standing and looking here is we just developed a partnership in the last couple months with the local beer makers. And so this is the waste from beer production. And we're now doing a study with them on how does this improve if we mix this in with the feed for our pigs, because we have a farm with about 103 pigs. If we're doing a study to look at how, if we mix this feed into the other feed, can it improve health outcomes for the pig? I did not know I was doing that when I started nursing school. I got to tell you, this was not the study I had planned. But it is so important when we think of, and we're getting more into this in nursing, but the One Health focus, which is the link between animal and human health and the environment. And this is human waste. So we're recycling the human waste, the beer production, into feed for the animal. These pigs then poop, and we compost that to fertilize our fields. So we're working on that as the environmental sustainability of our project. So in 2010, we were lucky enough to get a funding from the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities. I can't say enough about the center because they took a chance on this, certainly. And so we started a trial in 10 of our villages. So this is the best part of this. We started this project with $400 and 10 pigs. We've grown this project to 35 villages and over 2,000 households. And that's the model of how they pay back, and we continue to move the project, the asset transfer. So we went into 10 villages. We tried to choose a variety of villages, but also we had to go into villages these were going to be new villages that wanted pigs. We had community leaders who said, no, we want you to bring in goats. And we were like, well, we don't have goats. And they were like, well, then we don't want you. So you have to make sure that this is something that the community is on board with as well. So that took a bit of time. So we did have 10 villages, and then we randomized at the household level. So we had 833 households participating. And what we did was we did a lottery in front of everybody. So households that were eligible put their name in a hat, and a child from the village pulled it out. The reason you can't go to your office and do a computer randomized, because people will start to think, hey, they picked your name because they like you better than me. And so we didn't want to put that burden on our team. So we did it right in front of them. They pulled out. The first one they pulled out went into the intervention, then the control, and then because we had so many more people, we had planned for 66 households per village. We had more, so we had a second control. But if you think, my promise to my partners was not to change the model to do the research, and that's a key component. So our motto is the loan goes to the intervention group. Those offspring from that loan, when they repay back, they go to the delayed control. So it was about an 18-month cycle. And we decided not to randomize at the village level because the villages that would be in the delayed control we thought it would be really hard to keep them involved when they didn't see the activity happening. And so their households involved in the pig farming and the program and mentorship, they would see that this is really happening and they are going to get their offspring. There's also risk of contamination. We recognize that. But we thought just for the success of the project and to keep people involved, that's how we were going to do it. So we also asked for the person in the household that would be responsible for the day-to-day care of the pig to be our who we would focus on for the interview, because we only had resources to interview one adult in the 16 and older in the household. So the majority were women because the pigs are kept in the household parcel. I don't know how to say that, the household grounds. And because we teach them to build a cage there, a pig pen there, for security, because if they were outside of the household grounds, the risk of being stolen is high. And pigs don't need a lot of space, and so we really worked on cleanliness and how to build the cages as well. As part of them getting the loan, they had to contribute to building the cage. And we taught them how to do that with local goods. They didn't have to buy anything special. As you saw those cages, they didn't look like the cages we might have here, but they're plenty good. And most were married, and they had an average of 3 children living in their home, and as I said, very few had attended school. Now, we looked at 18 months post baseline, and I, of course, was interested in health, especially in a region where there's been significant conflict and trauma and violence. We looked at improvements in the group that received the pig versus the group, the delayed control. And as you see, I think most importantly, a significant reduction in symptoms consistent with anxiety, but also improvement in symptoms of PTSD and overall perception of health. And this is important in an area where there's no mental health care at all, and at all. And so I think part of when we're doing some qualitative follow-up, but a lot of this anxiety reduction is having sort of knowing that you have a little bit of savings in that pig if a crisis comes, that you could be able to, if your child got sick, you could pay the bill, right? I mean, many of you are mothers and fathers in here, and so you know that feeling, I'm sure. I'm not a parent, so I have dogs, but, and pigs, so. So we also, because I do research in violence prevention, and one of the things that we've learned in research economic development programs, that if you don't engage men from the beginning, and we exclude them and we're focusing only on empowering women, that can create conflict in the household. So we certainly measured violence against women, and we saw a reduction in men's reported perpetration and women's report of experiencing violence. It was not significantly different between the groups. They both declined. And part of that issue is this was not a main outcome for our study, so we didn't power on this variable. So in our next study we will power to this and see if we really can see a significant reduction. But where we saw the most reduction was in psychological abuse, where husbands would say, "You're worthless," put her down in front of other family members. We saw a significant reduction in that. She was seen as, once again, a productive member of the family. So we also looked at economic development. I love that kid in that purple shirt. Isn't that the best? He's so funny. So at 18 months, we looked at the households with unpaid credit and loans. And in this area, it's not like there's a bank that they take loans out, or even only 1% had participated in any cash microfinance. This was loans to hospitals and to health clinics. About 30% of the loans, the highest amount was to the health center. So we have what you may have heard of is pregnancy jail. When a woman delivers and can't pay, they won't release her. And so imagine the impact on the rest of on her family and her other children if she can't go home. And so it becomes quite an ordeal. And so they take out a lot of loans, which includes some interest. So this was, and the other is certainly to the markets, buying food on credit, and to neighbors. So we saw a reduction in about 25% in the households in the PFP program. We also saw an increase in assets, but that would make sense because we gave them a loan of a pig and they participate in the program. So we really don't focus too much on that. The other thing is, because this is a community where they have not had a lot of education, we do a lot of practical education. So these are two fields that we use the compost from the pigs and demonstrated that we can improve agriculture output. So you can probably tell which field had the compost and which didn't. My colleague liked to circle them just in case you didn't see. But this is an example. I mean, this isn't rigorous research, but this is visual support to why this is important to engage in. Now, of course, we can't go with the family, so the community said, okay, that's great. What about the kids? Our kids used to be part of the household, raising animals and livestock, and so we decided that rabbits. So, of course, because we don't have anything better to do, we made up a name, Rabbits for Resilience, Pigs for Peace, Rabbits for Resilience. And these are boys and girls involved in ages 10 to 15, involved in rabbit microfinance. And so it's the same model where we provide a loan and they pay back the loan but it goes to other children in their household oftentimes, their siblings. And you can sell a rabbit for $8 to $10. But also what's important is this is good protein that the family can have for dinner. Right? So this would be could be used as a family meal if that was what they decided. So again, why rabbits? Well, easy for youth to raise. It's appropriate. Youth have had a history of raising rabbits. And it's not going to prevent them from going to school or doing other activities in the community. We always know that they reproduce frequently. The food is widely available. It's just like pigs. Pigs eat everything humans eat, so you can feed them easily. There's no cultural taboos, age or gender-based responsibilities, and they're a good source of protein. And so Congo was colonized by the Belgians And so there's been a long history of eating rabbits, lapin, as the meal. If you go to Belgium or France, you would know what I'm talking about. We always have rabbits on. So we have had a trial for this. The National Institute of Child Health and Human Development provided us with the trial. We'll end at the end of this year. But we looked at rabbit-only. We're looking at rabbit-only households to control group, again, the delayed control. And we followed them for up to 24 months. And we made sure that we had both girls and boys and a range of ages. And what we've seen, and that's so important, is because of the high rate of malnutrition in this area, they estimate that 50% of the children are malnourished, and we know the long-term impact of malnourishment. We saw a significant improvement in food security for those families in the rabbits groups. We saw a 21% improvement in the measure of, we're really looking at diversity of food items that they're eating in the last week and in the last 24 hours. And the effect was greatest for the younger children, and that's critically important in the development of the children, where we saw a 45% improvement in food security. We also look at school attendance, again, such an important part of these children's futures, and such an important focus for the parents as to why they're doing the PIG microfinance. It's the primary reason they talk about is getting their kids back into school. It's not an issue of being enrolled, it's an issue of attendance. Girls and boys are both enrolled, but the attendance might be lacking more for girls. If a child's sick in the home, they will stay home and take care of the child while mom works or dad goes. They have to go and do their daily. If people don't go do their daily labor, they're not eating that day. It's not like there's something in the refrigerator, leftovers. So the percent of children missing 2 or more days from the school in the past month declined 17% and then we saw an increase in the control group, which is, could be linked to there's a massive change in the monetarily, because of the instability in the country, the franc, the money there went from 900 francs to $1 to now 1,600 francs to $1. So school becomes more expensive, et cetera. So that might be. And we saw the largest effect in the older children, which might say that in the past, we need to do the qualitative work on this. In the past, these children would leave school because the money wasn't there, and the younger children would be allowed to stay. So these children, even the older school children, were able to stay. And then we looked at stigma. These households have experienced so much conflict and so much negative impact. These children have lived a life in the conflict and the insecurity, and so there's a lot of distrust between community members of who's with what rebel group. There's, when you lose people suddenly and there's a lot of loss, there's also a lot of witchcraft that comes along with that, and sorcery, and people are labeled as witches. And so if a family member if an adult has a conflict, a problem in the community, their children do too. And so we looked at attitudes and beliefs that lead people to reject or distrust, fear others. And so if you just think for a second, I always try to relate this back to my life. Look at the fear we have in our country of other right now. It's fear drives so much of this, and this is what happens in conflict or unstable situations, the fear of other. And so that impacts how people feel about themselves as well. If they feel like people are afraid of them or judge them, they're going to feel completely worthless, they're going to feel ashamed, they're going to feel that they brought a lot of trouble to their family. And we didn't see an effect on that when we combined the age group, but we did see an effect for the older children. As they're more likely to be out in the community, have more interaction socially. So that might be an important finding. Again, we need to do some follow-up qualitative research. So I'm going to end there. And thank you so much for your attention, and cheers.
Would you like to take some questions?
Yeah. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Just too good.
That's it.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for your talk. This was really very interesting. One of the things that I love about nurses is that we're responsible for everybody, everywhere, in all ways. How did you get this funded? And how do you describe to people that might be skeptical that this is nursing?
Oh, such a good question. I get this all the time. And you guys know this is quintessential nursing, isn't it? This is who we are, bringing the holistic approach, understanding that we can't address the health problems without really addressing the priorities in the community, the economic challenges, the access to resources. To me, this is just who we are and how we're trained. So I constantly have to relate it back to health. Like, how do we improve health, the structural determinants of health? That is how I focus, and that's how I focus on my funding, talking about the structural determinants of health, of trauma and violence and poverty. So that's how I framed it within the studies. I'm now having to frame a little differently, because this is international work, and it's certainly not a priority of our current leadership. And this makes me feel a little creepy when I do this, but when we talk about migration and refugees, if we want people to stay in their own country, like we sound like we do, one of the things we can do is help them build their economic base and stability, peace, stability, health systems. And so, because I can promise you that the Congolese love their country, they want to stay there, but they also want their children to have a future, just like we all do. And when they get to the point where they can't safely stay in their homes and their children are insecure, they have to make a move. And so my colleague Remy has 10 children. And 3 different times, he had to gather all his family and lead them out of his home, not knowing if he would ever come back, to a rural area and hide in the bush. Just imagine. And his children are his oldest son is a physician, now working in Kenya. His oldest daughter is economics major here. She lives in the U.S. And then he has a lawyer in Congo. He has an engineer in Congo. He has, all these amazing children that he has had to. Luckily, he had his microfinance business, and he worked so hard to keep it going. But he made the commitment to stay. But he's worried his children can't find jobs there, and so his children are now not thinking necessarily that they're going to go to the U.S., but they're going to go to other African countries where there are opportunities. And that's that brain drain, right? That excellence that leaves the country that we're really struggling with. So I have been focusing now on shifting how I sell the grant to we're trying to build the capacity in country for poverty reduction, development, so that people aren't going to want to migrate. Makes me feel a little creepy, I don't know, but I'll get over it. So I tell you, it's I always consider grant writing as creative writing. Clearly I love this. It makes me happy. And so for me, writing about this isn't hard, but I grab the priorities for whichever institute, and I work from those priorities on how I can link my research to those priorities. I'll go here, yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation, and I really applaud the dedication that seems to come along with this. Along those lines, you mentioned at the very beginning that you took 10 years. Before the 10 years and your love for Congo, how did you develop this idea to bring this passion for these people to this? It didn't happen overnight, but it also took some thought. Could you talk about that a little bit? And actually, I'm from Texas A&M, so thank you.
So yes, I mean, my research, I didn't immediately focus in global health. I focused certainly in the U.S. My research, again, was in violence prevention, and my funding came from NIH, but was focused on, I did an intervention on reducing workplace violence for home care workers, for example, because there was CDC call on employment, workplace violence, so I twisted myself into a workplace violence person. I also focused on, I've been building a program of research looking at using technology as a resource for young people to reduce violence, exposure to violence. And I also work within the healthcare system. So I have an Office of Women's Health study to look at prevention of violence in primary care settings in multiple states. So I built those lines of research and kind of stabilized myself, like that, and then started, which means, what that means to deans is you have funding, right? Stabilize myself. And so I started then thinking, okay, now I might be ready to go and explore this again with partners. And I always wanted to go back to the Congo. And I felt like I had a little leverage to go into my dean, Martha Hill, you guys might know Martha, and say, if you give me $10,000, if you invest in $10,000, I'll bring in an NIH grant. You kind of go with it, push it. And she looked at me, and because I needed some money to go do some exploratory research in the Congo, talk to people, learn more about what was needed. And she gave me the loan, and I paid it back, and I think a couple times now. But you have to invest. I can't say enough. You have to invest in your research, your time and energy, and you know this. You do it every day, but you also can, ask for a little support to do something innovative or different. $10,000 is really not that much money, but it's amazing what you can do with $10,000. Is there any internal funding that you can get to explore this? That's how I did it, just little by little, building the relationship. So again, give yourself time, but it's always good to build your base here with the funding, and then that allowed me to leverage that to go do the global work.
Thank you so much for a wonderful and enjoyable presentation, and I can really see your dedication to your research and the population. So your background, as you said, is in violence, and so I was wondering, I know you focused in the Pigs for Peace on violence reduction in women. Have you thought about, with the Rabbits and Resilience, looking at violence reduction in children?
Yes, we have that data. That was a big part of violence between siblings and peers, but also we're starting to look at harsh punishment and the link, because we know that kind of violence in the home leads to future violence. So yes, we do have, as well as community violence. We haven't finished the study, so I haven't looked at that as carefully yet, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That was a wonderful example of so many lessons that we could learn from what you told us this morning about your own resilience and about adaptability and about matching your wishes for research to the agency missions, et cetera. And it wasn't all that many years ago that I was in Uganda, and we were tracking guerrillas, and we reached the edge of the country to the Congo, and we were standing there with this enormous, very dark river in front of us, and we're told we couldn't go across because the country was at war. We could see the soldiers and all of that, and there was such violence. Not much later than that, a colleague from Justice went to help them create new laws to rebuild the society, and he had so many stories, writing back that were of violence and enormously difficult circumstances. So I understand that you have a love of Congo, but I'm also very impressed with your strategy and your thinking process of how you decided to go into an area that was so underdeveloped. Was it because the need was so great? Was it because of your passion? How were you able to find the people to work with? How were you able to develop partners? And so that's an enormous amount of work, and I think it would be interesting to see how you strategize that, and would also have lessons for us in other environments that seem equally daunting, although not quite as difficult.
So one of the best things is I had lived there as a Peace Corps volunteer. So I'd lived I did my Peace Corps training for 3 months right in the town where I work outside that town now. So I knew a little bit. I had some colleagues there that I just had stayed in contact with. But how I got back to this partner was a professor at Hopkins introduced me to an economics professor at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, who was from Congo. And we just started talking, and he said, well, my father-in-law runs a microfinance organization in Congo. If you're going to go back, I'd borrowed this $10,000 from the dean. If you're going to go back, why don't I have him meet you, and he can show you around? And so that's how it started. And that's how my partnership with Remy, my colleague, and I started. And for 2 weeks, the two of us got in a car, and we drove around the area, the rural area. And, you know, the thing about when people live in fragile or insecure settings, communication is so important, and everybody has a cell phone. So you would call ahead and say, how are the roads, any issues? And so that's how we traveled for the first couple weeks. And Remy, I think he himself, because he had lived in Bukavu, which is the capital city, didn't realize how bad it was out in those rural areas because they hadn't been out in years. And so it really impacted him as a microfinance expert on how he's going to get resources to the far outer rural areas that were just so impacted. So it became a passion for both of us, really thinking through. So, you know, it's, you know, relationships just start with a conversation and then just follow up. The thing that I always loved about Renmi is he was, you know, he was right in my face. You know, and I like that. Like, this will not work. That is a stupid idea. We're not going to do that. And you need that in true partnerships, or you waste time going down the wrong path. And I'm not saying we didn't make mistakes, because we did, and we've learned a lot. But having a true partner who will tell you what's right or wrong is really important. And we often say to each other, if we had had money in the beginning, we wouldn't have been successful. It was that little bit of money that we had the nickel and dime, and we trusted each other, that we weren't trying to get over on each other, that we were able to really think through the project. So now I'm ready for millions of dollars. We got the infrastructure. But before, I don't think it would work. And the stability, so the key thing is, you know, I am French speaking. I do speak a bit of Swahili. I understand Swahili. I feel very comfortable there, and you know, after being there for 10 years, I have my own car there, I have a little place there, but I'm in a secure area with living on the same grounds with my colleague and his family. They built an apartment, they call it the apartment of transition. When their sons would be getting ready to marry, they would move them into this apartment so he could start to learn what it was like to be responsible. The daughters already knew, the sons had to move into the apartment. So now I'm in the apartment to transition because all the sons have grown and gotten married. So I'm in the apartment of transition. And so, you know, I have a space that I feel very safe. And I don't do anything without a conversation with them. I don't travel places. I don't go out. I don't, because it is dangerous. And they do not know who's who sometimes. And so we still have a lot of fun. I'll go to a restaurant, but a lot of time I just spend with my colleagues or in the villages where I feel very safe. And students have come with me. I've had 2 PhD students who have finished their PhDs, but they have to have had some experience, some language skills, or it's just too hard on them. I can't take students now. It's too dangerous now. And I will go in a couple of weeks, but I'm staying much shorter periods of time. I used to stay all summer, but I probably won't do that because it's too much of a burden on them to do that.
Hi, my name is Natalie Joe. I'm from the University of Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a second degree student, so my first degree was ag biotech with I was short of an animal science minor.
Yeah.
So I thought I totally left that life behind when I came into nursing. This is exciting for me.
Yeah.
But I was curious with that background, if you've seen or if you've thought about incorporating pigs and humans have very similar health needs. So I was wondering if you've seen an empowerment or a knowledge increase in the women that are taking care of these animals, or if you've thought about incorporating that into their routine.
Right. Yes, so one of the things I've been started to talk about, you know, Vermox, which is medication for ringworm or hookworm, which we have a lot of problem. Pigs need Vermox as well. So we give our pigs Vermox. So we're going to start working with that notion of the last mile, getting resources, medications out to the further ends through our project. So trying to connect health in that way. So we also, you know, one of the things that's really important, because I don't have your background in animal health and agriculture, I have to bring in the experts. And most of the time they're Congolese experts. But I did take a public health vet with me. She was at the University of Vanderbilt at that time. She's now at the government. And she mentored my team. And then they mentored the women in the community and the men in the project around health. How do you know, signs of an unhealthy pig, and signs of how much is it estimating the weight, and really improving vaccination. And so we have to bring in other people, and that's the fun part about this, the interdisciplinary connections that I never thought I would have. And so a couple weeks ago, I did a One Health symposium, and there was all these vets, and it was me. And it's so fun to say, nurses are really good at this. You guys should be partnering to us if you want people to train community health workers, to link it animal and human health. I mean, I just think that we're in a really great position, especially on the environmental end as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you back.